Issa. Okay, Issa? Yes. Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future, with a more sophisticated approach.
Welcome back to the show, guys. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing someone who I've never really spoken before, but has so much in common with me. We're both people who accepted Islam in our adulthood, people who've gotten very active. In fact, we are both former CAIR-Houston Executive Directors. So I can't wait to get to know him and talk to him a little bit about his story, how he became a Muslim, and then pick his brain on advocacy and the challenges the American Muslim community faces. So without further ado, we are going to bring in William White. Assalamu alaikum, William. How you doing?
Salam, Brother Isa. How are you today?
Alhamdulillah, man. It's so good to talk to you. I'm really feeling the Chacha Amu status right now. Going from being the first executive director at CAIR-Houston to now a past executive director at CAIR. So I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. I've been out of Texas for so long. I wanted to get up to speed on what's going on.
Oh man, there's so much going on. And I have to say, Isa, I have been a fan of yours since before you even knew me. I was just a dude walking around Houston going, who is Issa Galloway? And then finding out who Issa Galloway is, mashallah, and just being absolutely amazed at the plethora of work that you've done in service of our community. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept every single second of it.
Ameen, Ya Rab. Ameen, and forgive us for all our faults. Because honestly, from what I know about you, and I want you to tell me about a lot about yourself, but I feel like we're in a way kindred spirits, because my introduction to Islam's really long story, but the short version is I read Malcolm X's autobiography as a kid when I was 13, and then the part when he went to Hajj just stuck with me. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made my roommate someone Adnan Jalali, in college. I moved from being on an army base in Germany back to Texas because I had in-state tuition. And then my first roommate in school was Adnan. And, we would debate religion forever. And then finally, long story short, I took Shahada still in college a year before 9/11 and a month before Ramadan. And then, with my show, I do a lot to talk about identity, civics, and civil liberties. And I'm going to bring identity right in because I feel like I didn't have even my bachelor's degree. I was studying to be a history teacher. And then all the imams are like, hey, there's this new Muslim guy, and 9/11 just happened. We want a CAIR chapter. Let's have him lead it. And I'm just sitting there going, oh my God, what? I've been Muslim like maybe 8 months at the time. So when you say, we're just a guy out walking around, this is the exact same way, bro, for me. So with that long-winded intro, how did you get introduced to Islam?
Ooh. Okay. So I don't think my introduction to Islam is different from anyone else's. And that, growing up, I had Muslim friends. Of course, post 9/11, it wasn't the most public information available about any one person. If they were Arab, most people assumed either this person is Arab Christian and they were very proud about it, or they were Muslim and they were very quiet about it in the schools that I grew up going to. And I can count on one hand, the amount of people that I know now were Muslim then. And so, it was very small. What changed everything for me were two things. One, like you, it was an introduction to Malcolm X. Although that wasn't why I converted. The second is, interestingly, an introduction to the Nation of Islam. So I was listening more as a young teenager to Louis Farrakhan than I was anyone else, just because that's who was there in my time. And there's a local Houston activist whose name I'm not going to refer to right now, that was very, very active when I was growing up. You would always see him on the news.
Who are you talking
Who
about?
was a member
You
of
can
the
say his
Nation of
name.
Islam, and well, Brother Quan LX.
Exactly. I actually had some beef with him on the news back in the day when I was the CAIR exec.
I'm gonna go look that up, Issa. I
It
want to
wasn't
see
that
that.
big of a deal, but
So
he's a good
my
man when it comes to getting people not shot. And, when manhunts are out for folks, he's safely got a lot of brothers out of that manhunt situation.
but he was always the person on the news, and um, that really impacted my view of Islam, such that my initial introduction was never positive. It was always Islam is this means to which people are finding justice in their lives. And that carried over. Um, so growing up, I had trained karate and jujitsu. Most kids do taekwondo or karate. I started kind of late in my childhood. I started when I was 12,
Mhm.
or I started when I was 11. And the teacher, the headmaster of this karate school, which at the time was on Briar Forest in Derry Ashford, um, was a Palestinian Arab man by the name of Ihab.
Mhm.
Um, Ehab was giving the most subtle dawah ever. Not in, he would say, the Prophet ﷺ would do this, but he would do what the Prophet ﷺ did. And I didn't know he was doing that until I became Muslim and started reading Hadith. And I'm like, oh, hang on, what? Ehab did this, Ehab did this, Ehab did this. MashaAllah, may Allah bless him and accept from him.
I mean,
There was always that, but there were also people, out of Muslim business, out of Muslims come to the business, right?
mhm.
And so there was a plethora of people, Latino, African American, uh, African Nigerian, that would come to the school, but there were also a lot of Arab Muslims. And there was this one brother, Abid Doamni, who would come and he would give me dawah outright. You know, he'd go make wudu in the bathroom, and I'd be like, "Hey, why are you coming out dripping wet from the bathroom? Like, what are you doing in there?" And he was like, I'm gonna go pray now that class is over, and I've made my ablutions. Um, and so there were these introductions that were happening. What really solidified my response, and not to get too into my personal life at the time, but you know, um, when I was looking into Islam, I was not in the best state of my life, as I think most people are not.
I
Um,
was wilding out in college, man. Same
yeah,
thing.
and I was definitely struggling with um, a lot of different things at the time.
Mhm.
Um, and I was working at the karate school I had been training at for most of my
That's dope.
childhood, and teaching karate, helping kids out with their homework in the after school program, and just cleaning bathrooms basically.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, the owner of the school, Ehab, said, gathered all the staff into a meeting, and he said, "Okay, guys, there's a war going on in Syria." Now, I had, of course, heard about the war going on in Syria, but I was not um, the most up to date in what was happening. Much like today, I still keep my nose down when it comes to international politics and look at a lot of what's happening around me. That was then and it is now. I knew there was a war going on. I knew there were two factions that kind of sprung out of the autumn spring. Um, I didn't really know much beyond that. And I knew, of course, there was a refugee crisis, especially in Europe.
Mhm.
So Ihab gets all the staff into the room and he
But
says,
just real quick, you were born in England, right? Or born in the US?
London, England. And I was brought here, I used to say against my will when I was a year old.
Okay.
It was actually a week after my first birthday, which now having a child, I don't know how my parents managed that.
Okay.
Um, maybe it's why they got divorced. I don't know. But They moved here a week after my first birthday. I'm actually in the house that we moved into all those years ago, alhamdulillah. And so, I was born in London, England. My father is British Australian. My mother is a fifth or sixth generation South Texan. She was born and raised in a town called Beeville, Texas, which, if you know where that is, I'm sorry. If you don't Google it. But my mother's from that town. And so, in addition to being, I'll use the technical term of an American immigrant, right. I am also someone that has very deep roots in this state and has had to do a lot of unlearning and had to find my own source of pride. And where I take that pride from is, I think, unique in a lot of terms. And that all was from my introduction to Islam.
When you talk about your pride, how so is it unique? I think, honestly, if you don't want to share, I get it. But one of the things that I think is so crucial to the way the Muslim community in particular, but all Americans exercise in a civic space or do their politics, is we all play identity politics. I mean, we act like it's a bad word, but at the end of the day, identity shapes who we are, and our experiences shape how we see the world and how we interact with others. So when you talk about having pride and it being unique, if you're comfortable talking about it, let's talk.
I've delved into this journey of, so I come from I grew up in working class neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. I was dyslexic throughout my entire primary education. Yeah. And so I was placed, because, Houston ISD at the time did not want to test for dyslexia for whatever reason. I was placed in often remedial classes where I would more than often be the one or second white kid in any class. And so most of my friends growing up were either black or Hispanic. Mm-hmm. Introductions to their realities made me hate whiteness in a way that was misplaced towards white people. And so coming into Islam, I remember when a week after I took Shahada, I was talking to somebody and they were like, they said something about me being an American Muslim. And I was like, whoa, I'm just Muslim. And I stopped there. And, oh my goodness, looking back, that's foolish because our Islam has a context to it.
Yeah.
And so, my pride of being someone who has family who has been in Texas for so long is not that they've been in Texas for so long. It's that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me in this position. I was fashioned in my mother's womb as He chose. Mm-hmm. And so I cannot atone for the sins of my ancestors, but I can try to make things right in the capacity that I have. And maybe atone is not the right word, but I cannot directly, seek forgiveness on their behalf.
This is such a crucial point. I want to sit here for a minute because a lot of non-Muslims watch this channel too. And one of the things I'm always trying to get to people is understanding what whiteness means in America, because people always talk about there's no such thing as white privilege or all that kind of, because I had a hard life too or whatever. And, our stories, the more I get to know you, the more I'm kind of shocked at how our stories are so similar, because my dad's Scotch-Irish. My last name's Galloway. It comes from that. For as far as I can tell through our lineage, and my dad was raised Mormon, so they do some pretty hardcore lineage, almost like the way the Arabs do. But we weren't slave owners. But I know if I go far enough back, because there's a famous football player named Joey Galloway. He used to play for the Cowboys, and I got jerseys for it, right? Just because it has my last name on it. So I know if I go far enough back, someone with my last name that came over here was a slave owner. And so basically this whole idea of like atonement for what other people did, I think a lot of people get confused there because um, it's like, no, you're not. We should all be just building a more just and equitable world. And um, again, everybody said this. This is played out. At this point, I feel like I have to say it. You know, white privilege is real because you don't have to deal with your race for the most part, except like when you were talking about being one of only maybe two white kids in a remedial class. You know, I was born in El Paso and my mother's Mexican. No one can tell, except sometimes other Latinos can see it in me. They ask me if I'm Mexican, but um, growing up, you know, all the kids at my elementary school was like almost 100% Latino, a few black kids. I was like the only white kid there. And I used to get in fights every day after school just from like trying not to be bullied. Um, and I kind of came to a similar thing because when I was growing up for a while and navigating Latino spaces versus white spaces, and then when people would feel comfortable just saying the most bigoted crap to me about like my mother, you know, when they're talking bad about Mexicans and stuff, I had this whole like, oh my God, I got to tear this stuff down. And what I meant was whiteness, you know? So I think we have a lot in common. But, you know, you were getting to the part where you're starting to find your pride. And I thought that was amazing when you said Allah formed you in the womb according to his will. And the reason I'm dwelling here is I feel like one of the things I've gotten a lot of trouble with is telling immigrant Muslim communities that they haven't paid enough respect, not just like homage, but even seeking nasiha from the indigenous African American community that either came from Malcolm X or Wafdi Muhammad, because these people are steeped in the civil rights experience, and as newer immigrants, you know, they have their own struggles, but let's face it, immigrant Muslims often look down on the Black Muslim experience and community, and it's not right.
That, and I notice a tendency to just move entirely away from the Black experience. So if you look at the history of Houston and the Muslim community that was here,
Mhm.
many of the first Muslim men and women that moved here from other places, Jordan, Syria, Pakistan, Palestine, Egypt, what have you, moved to or next to Black neighborhoods.
Mhm.
I'm talking Third Ward, Fifth Ward.
Yeah, you ever been to Mohammed Masjid, right next to the TSU?
Yeah, of course. You got to stop and pray also there when you're losing class.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even like if you look at the lineage of the Islamic Society of Greater Houston, starting on Woodhead, which is in Montrose, that was a majority Hispanic neighborhood when that masjid was there. So the Woodheaders, I mean, now of course it's this historic neighborhood, and Reno Couture, the president of the University of Houston, lives there, and all these rich doctors and multi-million-dollar homes.
Right.
But at the time, those townhomes were occupied by other brown families, and so they are not that we are not that far removed in our experience from them. But I see as Muslims move further and further and further out into the suburbs from where they came from in Third Ward, next to Black and brown families, all the way out now to the greater suburbs of Houston, Richmond, Rosenberg, Katy, and now even Sealy, that they are living in these $500,000 homes with the two-car garage, and there's no longer uh, a willingness to be anyone but yourself, and that's fine. But we have a broader community that we need to think about, and so if you're not going to engage, don't stand in our way.
For sure. And just for context, people on the East Coast are like here in Colorado, a $500,000 home in Houston is probably $1.5 million, you know, home in those states because it's
You're
not that the
talking
cost of living is so
three
much.
bedroom, four
Yeah,
bedroom.
these are these are ridiculously huge, nice homes we're talking about.
Yeah, with a two-car garage in the front and backyard. So very, very nice one.
So you were talking about where the source of your pride comes from, and I think the indication before I interrupted you was that Allah had placed you in Texas with the background and parents that you had for a reason. Because I was asking you, like you said, you had a unique source of your pride and your identity. So I wanted to go back there. I thought it was a good time to kind of address a couple things in the story. Sorry for interrupting.
No, absolutely. So I mean, we'll get to the bigger picture of how this happened later, but just recently I went to go view uh, graves with my mother, and these were graves of our ancestors. And I took my daughter with me, so we went on a 2-day excursion in South Texas. It was interesting because I stopped at the Islamic Center in Victoria, which was infamously uh, burned down in 2017, the night after Trump signed the Muslim ban. Um, I stopped there, prayed Dhuhr, said salam to the sheikh and salam to some of the people there, and continued my way down south with my daughter. Stopping at Chick-fil-A, getting her some chicken nuggets, and continuing on and arriving in my mother's hometown. And my mother's hometown it's actually kind of a small city now, with population 20,000, I think, which is much bigger than it was when I was growing up. Um, and we were going to different cemeteries around South Texas and Live Oak and San Patricio and uh, towns that most people in the Muslim community have never heard of. And my aunt was showing me the graves of my ancestors, and now I saw, white folk like to do this thing of memorializing people, and so on each headstone they would have their job, which is just fascinating because they didn't take their job with them in that grave, but they had their job. And there are several people that I'm looking at who were Texas Rangers. Now I know now Texas Rangers were more responsible for killing the indigenous population of Texas than they were anything else. I had people on there in my family lineage who were federal and state judges. Um, and that sounds cool. I had some redneck hillbilly from South Texas that was a judge in Corpus Christi in my family lineage. But the reality is they were probably responsible for a lot of Black death, um, and death of Black people, and upholding laws that were bigoted and supported apartheid.
And sundown bells and all of that. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so my pride does not come in them. It comes in the fact that these are my ancestors who I am now able to say, I'm not going to let that happen anymore. And that's where my pride comes in.
I want to interrupt you here too,
done.
because something I see all the time I don't know how often you monitor right-wing media, but because of my time at CAIR,
Try not to. Yeah.
I always would deep dive into it because I want to know, what my opposition's doing, what they're thinking,
I'm so glad I'm not the only one. As you're saying that, I thought I was crazy when I was doing it. I was doing it last night. I was diving into a presentation that somebody put on here in North Houston County called Waller. And I'm like, oh man, what am I doing? I don't work for Muslim organizations anymore. I need to get off this.
Yeah, no, back in my CAIR days, I was always listening to right-wing AM radio. And then now, I stay on Twitter just honestly to see a lot of what they're talking about. I haven't made a Truth Social account. I did download the app to my phone, but I see a lot of these neo-Nazis and these, Christian nationalists, white Christian nationalists in particular, and, the people who buy into the white replacement theory. And I always hear them say stuff like blood and heritage or, blood and soil type stuff, which gets really Nazi-esque. But the amazing thing to me is they're being defined, or they're defining themselves. Actually, it's a proactive definition, not on what they're doing, not on their life's accomplishments, not on who they are, but on their lineage, their past. And I always look at that and say, in my mind, it always makes me think much less of these people, because if they had something that they'd accomplished that they were proud of, they wouldn't have to go back 3 or 4 generations to be like, I'm proud of being white, or I'm proud of my great grandfather's this. They would be talking about what they offered the world right now. Um, and I just think it's a really important distinction when you're talking about where your pride comes from as being someone who's, social justice and just even justice oriented. Sometimes the language is so loaded, but so you were going back into how your source of pride is coming from, fighting or undoing some of what maybe society had done in the past.
Absolutely. And it occurred to me as I was visiting these graves with my aunt is, we came up to one town. I couldn't even tell you the name of the place. And, we turned down this one road that led to a church. Right before we turned down that road, there was a gas station, and there was nothing else in the town. So it was a church, there was a cemetery, a gas station. That was it.
In Texas, we have a saying, if it doesn't have a Sonic or a Walmart, it's not actually a town.
Exactly. My father used to tell me as we were driving around the English countryside, in order for a city in England to be a city, it has to have a cathedral.
Yeah.
And so you'll find some towns in England that have a population of 500 people but have a cathedral in it, and so they're called cities.
Wow.
And it's definitely the same in Texas.
Okay, so you were going to a grave site?
I'm going to this cemetery, and it occurred to me as we pulled up, we're probably the only people here for 50 miles. And when we get to the cemetery, there's hundreds of people buried here, most of whom have my grandmother's maiden name. And I'm looking at these people, and of course, I'm hearing stories from my aunt who's describing the genealogy of it all, of this person was related to this person. This is the child that died in a building fire from that person. And it occurred to me the story that Sheikh Omar Suleiman opened up this most recent Ramadan series from, where he talks about a man who comes to a town, and he sees a man there, a sheikh, a scholar, and he says to him, please take me to the dwellings. And the scholar takes him to the graves, to the cemetery of this town. And the man hits him over the head and said, I told you to take me to the dwellings of the city. And he said, these are the dwellings. And, when I look at my ancestors now, they're in their dwellings.
Yeah.
Their dwellings being their graves.
Mm-hmm.
I can either build my own family dwelling, and the dwelling for communities that were frankly oppressed by my family, or I can go and sit in their dwellings and dwell on what they did and what they presented. There was good in it for sure. Family values. I'm not saying that to say there's good in everything, other than to say they're my family. I still owe a lot to them.
Well, in all honesty, doing CAIR so early into my life as a Muslim was formative. But in a lot of ways, when I moved to Tennessee and worked there for an outfit that kind of is like I would call CAIR 2.0. One, it wasn't only oppositional in its approach. It wasn't civil rights at its core, but it did do civil rights work. And then two, it had a companion C4 organization so that it could, do local politics at the state level. And I bring that up because I was terrified moving into Tennessee, home of the Klan. I'd lived in Blue Dot syndrome, throughout Texas. And then I would find in these tiny podunk little towns the sweetest people. Now they were treating me right, probably because they didn't know I was Muslim and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that small town and Southern living offer that we've lost in big cities, that we've lost on the East Coast. Like I would go into a Walmart and get excellent customer service. I'm talking like Chick-fil-A style attentiveness that you wouldn't even get on Rodeo Drive or the Magnificent Mile in Chicago, the way people would talk to one another. And then everyone knows their neighbors' names. That kind of thing is lost in American society in large swaths of it. And I think Muslims, like one of the things that's always a pet peeve to me, you talked about your reaction to being called an American Muslim. I heard my own kids, sometimes react in weird ways like that, but you see it all the time, especially with, more often than not, I found with like South Asian Muslims, when they talk about people, especially the chachas, the uncles, they talk about Americans and they mean white people, right? And in their mind, uh, they're like reinforcing the right wing narrative that we're hearing from MAGA right now, that America is white Christian culture. And I always have to check them. And in fact, one of the reasons I started going by Paul again in the Muslim community, it was tactical for Tennessee. The whole reason really was I didn't want my mom to cringe when she heard someone calling me something other than, she gave me as a birth name. Um, but
Something I relate to a lot because I went by Bilal naturally
oh wow,
when I took my shahada.
okay,
My mother, some point early on, heard me being called Bilal, and I saw her face, and she never. It was an interesting experience because my mother would always tell me, "I don't like that you did that," and her way of being 5 foot tall and a bit of a hothead,
yeah,
and may Allah bless my mother. I mean, she would always let me know, but I saw her wince at that. And that was the moment that I just decided right then and there, my name is William Robert, and I'm going to go by that. That's my Muslim name. And of course, as time went on, understanding who William Quilliam was, who established like the first mission in Liverpool, Robert of St. Albans, who was, he was a crusader that went to go invade Palestine and wound up converting to Islam and marrying Salah ad-Din Khamis. Uh, so that level of uh, Islam was present in them. It can be present in me as well with my names that were given to me, and that's not to knock anybody that changed their name. May Allah give you barakah. But for me, it was just like, oh, this name has already been given to me. I don't need to change anything about it.
Yeah, that's such a perfect story because what I was going to is, like I often in the Muslim community like to go by Paul just because in a way I'm a jerk. I enjoy the cognitive dissonance of people, you know. But on the
That's
other
present
hand,
too for me. Trust me.
on the other hand, though, I like really am trying to get people to understand that um, their Muslim identity and their American identity don't have to be in conflict. You know what I'm saying? um, that we all have what's called a layered identity. And when you start to have a battle within yourself over the different parts of your identity, just like when your community turns inward, you stagnate, right? You don't grow as much as you can. Um, so, man, I find that fascinating. And so you were telling the story about Sheikh Omar told about the scholar going to the town, and you were drawing analogies to I think your aunt telling you lineage. Uh, what's next?
I mean, look, these people are in the grave. They're in the ground.
Right.
I'm in the house that I moved into when my family moved to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They're in their home, and I can look at my home and think of ways that I can make it better. They don't have that benefit,
Right.
but I'm not going to look to them to figure out how I can make my home any better. And so, that being said, my pride comes in that I have this long lineage, that I have this white identity, that I can bring cognitive dissonance to uh, white evangelicals who are extremely opposed to Islam here in Texas. And I have a story I'll come back to in a little bit about that.
Sure.
And I can take my identity and promote good with it. I don't have to sit here and stagnate and think about, well, I'm a white Muslim and the Muslim community doesn't cater to me, and I'm just gonna not do anything with this. Allah has given me this. I'm gonna do something with it. And so
that's admirable. I think, though, at least my experience, and I don't know if things have changed because we're, I guess, legitimately from two different generations. I'm 50 years old now. I don't like to admit it, but I'm full cha-cha status, and the in the back that everybody's like, "Oh God, shut up." But back when I was starting, I noticed that like white Muslims got the royal treatment, the red carpet rolled out, and you wouldn't see that for other converts, even Latino converts. Um, and I wonder, because the generation coming underneath me, the people who were just graduating from law school, I used to call them the secular fuqaha because they were like mostly, Muslim through cultural identity, and they just got their like law degree. And then they just would pop up in the mosque and expect to be handed the keys of leadership with barely any Islamic knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Do you find that is that still
Uh,
kind of the case, or do people now like
to a
there's not
certain
this
extent,
whole
I felt that the convert community as a whole is being taken advantage of by a lot of the quote unquote born Muslims. Like,
yeah,
we're the ones to volunteer, we're the ones to work jobs that nobody else wants to work. And we get the brunt of the anger at those organizations that um, we're working at. And uh, I say that I'm going to park it there. I'm not going to go any further into that.
basically we're
But
treated like the women of Islam. They get all the things done and never the credit, right?
right. Um, and as well, speaking about Houston specifically, um, a lot of what has been built for converts, Arabic classes, um, classes about Aqidah, invitations to open mosques and days at the mosque to invite convert families to, etc., has been built by converts. There's like one or two exceptions there, um, but it's been built by converts. And again, I'm speaking about Houston. I'm not talking about Albuquerque, where Sheikh Talha Muhammad has built an amazing community. May Allah bless him. I'm not talking about Dallas or Austin, where I know there are people trying there. But here in Houston, when I converted, nobody was teaching Arabic classes, um, at least not uh, Quranic Arabic classes. And so that was a huge thing for me to get over. But anyways, I digress. My experience as a convert, though, um, being a Muslim activist was interesting because there is cognitive dissonance towards me.
Mm.
Um, and that my name is William White. I was a director for CAIR-Houston for 3 years, 3.5 years. And there was always something interesting that happened is, walking around the Texas legislature, I did get a lot of hate. Um, I would proudly wear my CAIR lapel pin. I would introduce myself as director of CAIR. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Was and still am very proud of the work that CAIR does, and I'm proud of the work that I did.
Me too.
Um, that confrontation, though, I noticed was very limited towards me, where uh, there was an organization who I'm not going to name because the Muslim community has this thing of when something happens, they fixate on it. So, for example, Texas Muslim Capital Day is invaded by evangelical racists
Hmm.
who's looking for white acceptance, uh, and the Muslims are the ones sharing the video.
Yeah, and we're making it go viral.
I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, great, give her more views, make her ad go up, give her a ton of money. Let's keep doing that. So I'm not going to say the name of the organization, but there's an organization that was targeting CAIR's work in the Texas Capitol. And, they came after me. They wrote one article about me, but it was very generic. It was like he's anti Semitic because he posted pro Palestinian things on his LinkedIn. And they linked to my LinkedIn. Okay, cool. Give me some more profile views. Thank you.
Yeah. Had the exact
But
same experience. There was this lady in Tennessee. I'll say her website. I don't know if it's even running anymore, but it was called Daily Roll Call. And to this day, I've saved. She has a 3-part series about me saying what every law enforcement officer should know about Paul Issa Galloway. And all she did was just regurgitate things that I've made publicly available. So for me, like the fact that she cared that much to like try to defame me, and then pretty much everything is like, oh, he was friends with so and so, and oh, he did work with this organization. I'm like, this is like my
Well,
resume,
associated.
I just send it out.
Yeah. I mean, now you can just view our LinkedIn and see everything that we've done in the past.
Right.
It's not something we're ashamed of.
Exactly. It's like if you're not doing anything wrong, and in fact you're trying to help, make a more just society. Yeah, write about me all you want. Just get my name right and get the organizations right.
the the thing that got to me though was, they write one article about me, whatever. They wrote 4 articles about the South Asian sister that worked under me. I mean, she didn't work directly under me, but she was her title was much less than mine in the CAIR rank structure. They wrote 4 articles about her, and I'm sitting here thinking, I've done everything she's done. Not give me the attention, but I think you're just doing this because she's South Asian and I'm white. And you realize that you cannot hate Islam if it's native to you. You can't hate Islam. You can't destroy it if it's someone who looks like you, who has your names. You have to attack the other.
And that's
And
why
so,
I always focus on like the history of the founding fathers with, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson having Al Quran, Benjamin Franklin saying when he built that Universalist temple that, Muhammad could preach here. I always go back there because it exposes the fascists for who they are, because they try to wrap themselves up in the Constitution and American identity. And then you hit them, with all of these facts, and they can't take it, and they obfuscate or they try to rewrite history, which is something they always do. But what you said reminded me of something that was really kind of eye-opening for me when I was still new at the CAIR role. We had opposed something, I forget what happened, but a guy who now works with Glenn Beck, he's always been friends with Glenn Beck, but he had his own radio show on AM radio in Houston. His name was Pat Gray. And he thought he was going to get me and asked me to come in and, to take live answers and calls from the Houston, community. And when he introduced me in studio, I remember he goes, "You're a white guy." It's like the first thing he said. And I'm like, "My mom's half Mexican." And he's like, "Yeah, but you're one of us." He literally said that. And then I got kind of a softball treatment. I recorded the interview. In fact, it streams on my website, but uh, it was hilarious just that was the first thing he had to say on camera or, on a recorded interview.
yeah, I mean, but I mean, that comes with its own double-edged sword of, I was walking around the Texas legislature one day, which is in the middle of Austin, but you wouldn't be able to tell. You'd think it was like in the middle of like, I don't know, Center, Texas, which, or Vidor, God forbid, in that it's all white. And I mean, there are black staffers, there are Latino staffers, there are even South Asian and auto staffers. They get treated very differently than the white staffers. And I know that because my wife worked in the Senate for the 86 legislative session.
Wow.
Now, my wife wears hijab. My wife is one of those really, really, really bright people, mashallah, that you just can't keep up with her.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible for me to do so. And so I know that it's impossible for others because in addition to having mastered not only the Arabic language, she has a degree in the English language. And so she is, she'll knock arguments way out of field and no one can respond when it happens. And I love to watch it as well with white supremacists because when they approach her, she's a brown hijabi woman who is clearly oppressed under the thumb of her husband. And they approach her and, oh, she has a master's degree from Rice University and she has a master's degree from the University of Texas. And she's really up on public financial management and public finance and can tell you about all these prolific writers in addition to telling me about Quran And so she would walk. She was working for one of the more progressive senators at the time. His name is Senator Jose Rodriguez.
Mhm.
He was only one of two senators to have voted against the BDS law that's currently on the books here in Texas. Um, and I attribute part of that to my wife's time in his office because she was advocating against it. And um, when she would walk on the Senate floor or into Senate committee rooms, there was almost like a stop, and everyone had to stare at her. And she got some of the dumbest questions you've ever heard. She wore a green hijab one day, and somebody said, "Are you wearing green because you're down with the Green Revolution?" And we were just like, "Man, how do we even respond?" Anyways, I digress. I put myself into this Muslim bubble.
Mm.
I'm a Muslim. I'm working in a Muslim organization. I'm doing Muslim things. I live in Sugarland, which is just surrounded by Muslims. All my friends are Muslim, and I'm walking up. I'm walking down the stairs, and somebody's walking up the stairs. And you know, uh, for all my Muslimness, I still wear cowboy boots. In the early part, it was kind of a gag. It was, haha, look at me, I'm Muslim, I wear cowboy boots.
But they're comfortable.
And so, yeah, I mean, they're super comfortable. I like them. I like the style. I think they're very cool shoes to wear. Um, I'm walking down the stairs and somebody's walking up. Now, the guy walking up is clearly from my mother's part of South Texas. Like he's white. He's wearing a Texas tuxedo with a bolo tie, a blue jacket, khaki pants, and brown cowboy boots, and a cowboy hat. And I'm walking past him, and I give him the masculine male nod, and he goes, "How you doing?" And it occurred to me at that moment, I'm very different from my wife.
Yeah.
Because she wouldn't have got that response. He would have walked right past her. And so that really put the impetus on me to use everything I had to try and change the situation around me so that people understood I'm an American Muslim, not gotcha. You didn't see that one coming, did you?
Right.
But so they understood I'm an American Muslim. I want you to ask me all of your dumbest questions. I want you to talk to me like you would if I wasn't Muslim and insult me and tell me all the things that you think I need to hear. And I want you to sit and listen to me when I respond. And that was the changing moment. Now, that got me a lot of enemies in the Texas legislature, but it also made me some friends that most people didn't think were worth making. State representative, not this past legislative session, but 2 years ago, a Ramadan resolution came up. Now, there's two Muslim representatives in the Texas House, so they try and do their part of pushing some level of acceptance and put forward a Ramadan resolution. And there were five evangelical Christians. I say that respectfully. They're evangelical Christians who voted against it out of a matter of personal belief. Right. To be quite frank, if I was in their position and a Christmas resolution came up, I'd vote against it. Just as a matter of, I'm not going to celebrate your holidays just because you want me to. I had no problem with him voting against it. That's fine. One representative took to Twitter, which it's still Twitter. The Gulf of Mexico is still the Gulf of Mexico. That's still Twitter.
I still call it Twitter too.
And I still call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Mexico.
Of course.
And so he took to Twitter and he went on this tirade about Ramadan and his experience as an Army veteran being the most violent time of the year. And he lost the most amount of friends in Ramadan. Now that I took exception to. And so being with CAIR at the time, I did the CAIR thing and I issued a press release. And I'm not sure in your time, Isa, I think it was a little bit different for you, but in other times in CAIR's history, that was all that was done. I'm speaking specifically about CAIR-Houston here, not to talk about the whole network. But that statement went out, and it was just kind of a hope. Maybe this person will change their mind when they see community pressure.
Right. What happened?
I knew for a fact the community was not going to put any pressure on this person except online. And that would just dig them into a hole. And they'd feel entrenched and they're not coming out.
Mhm.
And so I called their office until they picked up. And one day, I called their office every day for 4 days. One day, I called at 9 a.m. right when they turned the phones on.
Mm.
And the chief of staff picks up. And I said, "Hi, my name is William White. I'm the director of CAIR-Houston." And she goes, "I've been wanting to talk to you.
Nice.
Why don't you come have a meeting with my boss?" And so we did. And I met with her boss. And he walks in late to the meeting because he's a Texas House representative. And he says, "Look, I voted against the resolution because I'm a Christian." And I go, "I get that. I don't care that you voted against the resolution. That's not why I'm here. I'd be going to visit 5 other offices. I care about what you said after the fact." He was taken aback, so much so that he didn't have anything else to say after I said that. And he took like 2 weeks, but he issued an apology.
Yeah. See, and here's the thing. Our community, and this is where I've wanted this whole conversation to go the entire time, is I want to pick your brain because you're closer to the work than I am.
We know
I'm
that.
doing a lot of community advocacy right now here in Colorado, but um, what I'm finding is just insane levels of apathy from not just our community, but Black and brown communities across where I live, at least. And I understand why in some levels. On another level, though, I look like, to me, I'm looking at the midterms in 2026 as an existential moment for the survival of Islam and Muslims in the US. And like, I don't know about Texas, but here we have off year elections. So November 4th, 2025, we've got city council, school board, all kinds of off year elections that nobody's active. And it's like less than 40 days away. And to me, I'm like, guys, this should be the practice run so that you're ready to vote, you're registered, you know everything, you've already researched your people. And I even have very specific ideas on like how to, like a legislative platform for Muslims. Like for me, if it was up to me, there would be a national organization that makes voting against Israeli and AIPAC lobby money the number one criteria with a couple of caveats. And then I have a whole policy platform that I think you could rally the Muslim community behind and position the Muslim community into being like a connector of all these other communities that have issues. Because you can bet your bottom dollar that the pro-Israeli people and the people who are still supporting genocide, their number one issue is going to be, no matter what the race is, if it's a local, school board race or if it's, a senator for the U.S. Senate, they're going to be 100% looking at their support for Israel. And so I look at this thinking, like, to the Muslim community, we all say all of this stuff, we talk to ourselves, we go to rallies all the time. But then when it comes to the one thing that can actually make our community be respected, being reliable and active voters, it's crickets. Is that your experience too? Or do you?
Now that I'm not working for any organization, I can say yes. Um, my
Allah said he will not change your condition until you change what's in yourself, or you change the condition of your hearts. And I think there's a direct corollary there. I know it's qiyas. I know it's not, I'm not a sheikh, but like, unless we have civics as part of who we are, because my theory of change is that Muslims are the quintessential First Amendment community, meaning our rights and ability to practice Islam is 100% protected by the First Amendment. That means we're more constitutional than any of these white right wingers or any conservative, really, because First Amendment to the Constitution literally guarantees our ability to practice our faith. And when we advocate for the Muslim community, it's different than any other community because we're at our core a First Amendment community, which means every other community, even those who hate us and oppose us, still benefit because we strengthen the First Amendment.
Absolutely.
It's like a no-lose situation, except we don't show up.
I
That's the one way we can lose.
right. Uh, and I understand that that's hard for people because, you know, it's now easy for people to insult us and offend us, and we have no means of recourse. I get that.
Who cares what they
But at
think?
the same
They're not our
time,
sheikh. They're not our family.
they're like, we know what happens to them.
Yeah.
Insult us all you want. Insult the prophet all you want. Watch your mouth, but go ahead.
Mhm.
Because we know what happens. It's in the Quran. We don't have to spell it out for anybody. If they want to burn our books, if they want to tear it apart, which, by the way, it's always an English copy of the Quran. So, you know,
Well, and how
uh,
do you retire a Quran? One of the ways is to burn it. I mean, so like, again, the stupidity of so many people who are, anti-Muslim bigots. At the
I'll
end of
say
the
that
day,
my experience, because, you know, I always love CAIR.
Mhm.
Uh, my
Me too.
experience there was I felt the need that I had to be a motivator.
Mhm.
Um, that may have not been what was expected of me, but that was what I expected of myself. And sometimes I felt that that was actually uh, prohibiting me from saying the whole truth, which is us Muslims, and I'm saying us, not you, us Muslims, are very tired. We're very fatigued. But we're not sitting under chattel slavery for us to give up, just as the Black American community did not. We are not sitting under the constant threat of murder, just as Mexican Americans did not. We are not sitting under genocide and ethnic cleansing as First Nations
Starvation.
people did,
Yeah.
or starvation. And so I don't understand how we're so willing to give up if we haven't even experienced the worst of it. And that isn't to say that, well, it could be worse. That is to say, we have so many people who are begging us to stand on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And we're just saying, nah, we're just saying, I'd rather have a halal bacon sandwich than do anything else. Because, in my opinion, and look, I know a lot of Muslim restaurateurs,
Mhm.
I know a lot of Muslim entrepreneurs. I love you. I appreciate what you're doing. You're building an identity. It's not the most critical thing at the moment. I don't
Exactly.
need I don't need 6 different ways to have halal fried chicken. And you don't have to keep opening Nashville hot fried chicken joints. What you could be doing instead, and if you do open that, great. Do what all other corporate mega uh, restaurants and grocery stores do, and give your customers the option to round up their the cents on their transaction
And donate to
and
something
donate it
worthwhile. Yeah.
to Muslim Legal Fund, to CAIR, to ICNA, to MAS,
Mhm.
something that builds the community up. Because I'm going to be blatantly honest, not all Muslim nonprofits are, but a lot of Muslim nonprofits are starved right now.
Oh, of course, man. So you and I were singing the same thing. I mean, I think the biggest problem, there's an old saying, I met the enemy and the enemy is us. Um, and I think the biggest issue with the American Muslim community is we're too um, we're too focused on our own needs, and we don't realize that as less than 2% of the society, we need to have coalitions. And we also look at politics as like this tribal game. like either 100% with me and that's to the point where we start to fight each other over Democrat, Republican, and these stupid inter-community fights. And we don't even focus on, like being a good ally community or how to like have a long-term advance. I mean, if you look at the seerah of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam, he knew who the munafiqun were, and he still utilized those people to do good things for the outcome of the Muslim ummah. And so, like, there's a lot of activists in the political space from the Muslim community that, quite frankly, without knowing their heart, on the outside, it makes my skin crawl. But at the end of the day, if they're more, if they get more powerful and more, have a better reach within either side, Republican, Democrat, whatever, it still is good for the community. So it's like, we got to stop this tribalism and start thinking about like just how to every day live up, to the values of Islam.
I think that, but I mean, I do want to just stop there and reflect. So one of the most, okay, for the non-Houston residents, I'll say this: there's a New York Times article about Fifth Ward, Houston, Texas. Fifth Ward is a historically black neighborhood in North Houston.
He used to live when I went to school. I was in a garage apartment in Fifth
Really?
Ward. Yeah, a garage apartment, not even a house.
That neighborhood has one of the largest cancer clusters in the United States.
Yeah.
It also has ground that is tested to give cancer if you plant and eat things from what you plant there. So people that live there can't sustain themselves off the land that they own. If you want to read more about that, there's a New York Times article. There's plenty of Houston Chronicle articles about Fifth Ward.
I'll put links to it in the description of this video. But like, there's a direct analogy to Memphis, Tennessee, and Elon Musk's, AI generators. They're literally poisoning the air with gas turbine generators, and it's causing all of these issues and respiratory disease amongst the poor black population of Memphis.
Well, there's that. But just to kind of fixate on Fifth Ward for a second.
Yeah.
Fifth Ward is majority black. There's some gentrification happening. Mm-hmm. It's not like what you've seen in Austin. It's not like what you've seen in parts of South Dallas. Because it's a cancer cluster. Right. Folks don't want to really move there. They don't really want to solve the problem. But if you just zoom in on Fifth Ward for a second, you'll find very quickly there are 4 masajid. One of them has at least 500 people attend for Jummah every week. There is a Muslim community that is directly affected, and it's on top of the fact that they are black. Mm-hmm. And so if you can't help someone for the sake that they're a human being and you should be there with them, help them for the sake that there is bound to be one Muslim amongst them that is also impacted by this. I think one of the things that gets lost on me a lot is people talk about Muslim issues. Okay, well, like clean water is an issue. Right. Are we going to dismiss that as not being a Muslim issue? Because the fuqaha, and I learned, I can't quote directly where this is from because I'm a lay person, but I was told by a sheikh, one of the conditions for establishing the salah in the town is that you have established clean water.
There's a whole science of how many kullas of water can have impurities in it before you make wudu with it. So yeah, this is fundamental, basic Islamic learning for a real serious student of knowledge.
But here in Houston, Texas,
we got
37% of Houston ISD students have tested positive for lead in their blood. And they're getting that from the drinking water. Mm-hmm. So are we really going to say that we're doing everything? And I want to just say that again so that y'all heard me. 37% of Houston ISD students tested positive for having lead in their blood. If that isn't something to act on and say this is a Muslim issue, I don't know what else to tell you. You just don't care.
That's the point. You know, like I floated with a couple of strategists before that if I was going to put together a legislative platform across, like a national platform for the American Muslim community, probably the number 2 item would be reparations for the descendants of freedmen. And people freaked out on that because they come from the immigrant background and everyone's in the oppression Olympics. And I'm sitting here thinking, first off, we've proven ourselves to not be reliable voters. We've swung left and right, back and forth, over and over again. Secondly, like, you know, just like the Jewish community, our community is very split on things like vouchers for public school. And there's a compelling case to make why Muslims would want vouchers. But at the end of the day, um, you know, like for Black and brown students who depend on good, solid public schools, vouchers is a real threat to them unless it's done with incredible means testing and all kinds of nuance. And so this idea of like reparations for the descendants of freedmen, it's such a core social justice issue. And it goes back to how you were telling your story about where you take pride in, about what you're doing with your life now versus, you know, like the history of some people in your lineage. And to me, when Islam tells you, you know, like there's 3 levels to faith, you know, like to hate it in your heart, to speak against it, or change it with your hand. I'm sitting here thinking, you know, you can combine all of those and repair historical harms for people. And not only that, do dawah at the exact same time, because being anti-slavery, especially anti-chattel slavery, and then all of those things, we have this massive amount of, you know, medical professionals in the Muslim community. And all you have to do is look at the transfer of trauma from one generation to another. And oddly enough, you know, it's Holocaust survivors, PTSD, people from foreign wars, and their children are being born with the trauma the parents experienced, and it's causing learning disabilities, all of these things. So it's also proven in the descendants of people who were enslaved. And so if there's ever a scientific case to be made for reparations, it's that. And then you tie it directly to what's happening to the pollution and the starvation and the trauma that's happening in Palestine. You know, imagine trying to grow something in the most bombed place on earth right now, even 3 generations from now. So if you want people to take our humanity seriously, we got to show up for other people's humanity at the same time. And it's what the dean teaches.
How about I tie it even more to folks? The people that are most impacted by the toxic waste dumped from the Port of Houston are the people that live next to it, who are majority Black and brown. Now,
Exactly.
I want everyone to just stop and think with me for a second. Where are F-35s being built in Fort Worth being shipped out from?
There you go.
They're being shipped out from the Port of Houston.
Hmm.
So if we're going to take on this fight against Mayors and Lockheed Martin, we can absolutely still show up for people who are adversely impacted by the Port of Houston. Those two should go hand in hand. It shouldn't just be, well, we're tired of our people being bombed, because we are. But how about we're tired of our people being, like, having a cancer cluster has got to be like the most intricate racism that someone can do. First, you say, well, you can't move here, you have to stay here. And then you say, well, we're only going to give you certain jobs here, only certain economic opportunity here. Oh, by the way, we're going to make millions right next door to you. That's got to just be like Minecraft that somebody has pulled over. And if we can't associate with that, if we can't see ourselves in that, and even if you can't see yourself, if you cannot come to understand that there are Muslims who are impacted by this, then I really don't know what to tell you.
And this is where we have the best opportunity to differentiate ourselves, because what always happens on the left, and I'm so critical of the left, I spend more time criticizing white liberals than I do racist right wingers because, like Malcolm X said, they're insidious. They're not directly in their bigotry. And where I'm going with this is this idea that, we look for one side or the other and, the team thing. But what you were talking about with the pollution and all of that, you know, we definitely live in a society with systemic racism, but the left will always call us fundamentalist or say that we're extremists because we believe in our religion. And they draw, like they'll call something that a right winger does a jihad, or they'll say
Yeah, they'll
to
call it the American Taliban or something.
exactly. And so like this whole idea where we're being outmaneuvered by all sides and being branded as the enemy by all sides. This for us to stand up, because of our faith for these social justice issues is the only way to answer that because we have so much good to give just if we actually lived up to our faith tradition, right? I mean, the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ asked the people that the Muslim is like a tree, and then, one of the Sahabi answers, what type of tree? And it was the date palm. And then the scholars have expanded on it saying, why was the date palm chosen? Because it stands tall, it has deep roots. And when people throw rocks at it, it drops fruit back for them. Like we're supposed to be beneficial anywhere we go as a
It's
community.
supposed to be well fragrant and
Yeah.
perfumed.
And so like to this idea of Muslim issues, a Muslim issue is exactly that the ground is cancerous in Fifth Ward. It's exactly the same thing when I mentioned Memphis and those gas turbines, causing cancer and causing, all types of respiratory diseases because it's positioned right next to, again, a marginalized neighborhood and community that can't just up and leave. It's Flint, Michigan, where there is a large Muslim community there, and the water is polluted because, again, it's a war on poor, disenfranchised people. And who took the message of Islam first in the Prophet's time, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It was the poor, disenfranchised people.
Among the first.
Can't hear you. Sorry. Just speak up a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I think what we're both getting at is that the Muslims have to move because, as we've seen, it doesn't change based on party. I think a lot of people can sit and lie to us and tell us, "Oh, well, it was better under Biden." It wasn't. It wasn't
Well,
because, and I say this with reason. The cancer cluster that existed under Biden existed under Obama. It
oh
existed
yeah.
under the first Trump administration. It's been present for 40 years.
There's
Nobody's
that
doing
famous
anything about it.
clip of Obama in Flint about to take a sip of water and then he doesn't. I don't know if you saw that, but yeah, you're right.
I think what we need to recognize is our challenge is not partisan. You can point to one party or the other and say, um, you can look at one party or the other and say that one is more beneficial than the other. That's fine. I'll say this to those people: the Muslim Democrats don't hold Muslim Democrats or don't hold Democrats accountable, and Muslim Republicans don't hold Republicans to a standard, and just let them be walked all over for thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, Muslim Democrats donate a couple $100s. Muslim Republicans will donate thousands and thousands of dollars, and there is no, okay, well, at least we want like an Eid recognition.
Yeah.
That doesn't even exist. And so our challenge is not in a political party. It's political. It's deeply political, but it's not going to be found in a political party. It's going to be found in community. And more than that, it's going to be found in faith. And if we aren't going to be grounded in faith or community, then you're just getting in our way. And if you aren't going to, if you are going to get in our way, then at the very least, donate to a cause that you believe in.
Mhm.
That can be CAIR, that can be Muslim Legal Fund, that can be IFNA, that can be Muslim Advocates, whatever the case may be. Just donate to it for God's sake, so that you're not standing in the way of some form of progress.
And here's the thing, like the good news about it not being um, a party-dependent response, is the vast majority of Americans don't vote. A growing, if not a majority now, don't affiliate with either party. And for sure, the vast majority of polling within the last 5 years is substantial, deep frustration with the political party. So people who still identify left or right, Democrat or Republican, they're not happy with their parties. And again, where I'm going with all this is you said it fantastically well. It's going to be based in community and in your faith. Faith, of course, first. But the beautiful thing about community is when you know your neighbors and you actually know their names, you can wave at them and they wave back, you can check in on them. No matter what happens politically, at least locally, you have a network that, you can rely upon. And more than that, though, is that we have to realize that a lot of people, if they keep their head down, may be unscathed. But what's coming for you is coming for you, whether you keep your head down or not, and you keep a low profile or not. And then I think we're living in a time right now where, that poem, at first they came for so-and-so and no one spoke up because I wasn't a gypsy, or I forget how the poem goes, but like right now it's like at first they came for genocide protesters and I didn't stand up because, the genocide happened overseas or whatever. At this point, like they're moving themselves and they telegraph all their moves because the Trump administration uses a model of normalization. They say something crazy, and then it gets a news cycle, and everyone debates the merits on if it's really unprecedented or not, and then how normal it is, and then if the Democrats
Unprecedented
will stand
again,
up.
and then
Yeah, and then eventually they do it, and that's exactly we've seen so many examples of this. So it started off with going after immigrants. And now they're transitioning to positioning us as far left progressives and Islam. When Charlie Kirk got assassinated, I've seen so many clips of him saying stuff like Islam is the sword that the progressives will use to slit America's throat. And then he says like these unholy alliances and all this stuff. And where I'm going with all of this to circle back to something you said was we need the people in all the different parties, the Republicans, the Democrats, the conservatives, the liberals, and all across the spectrum. We have Muslims that fit in all of those places. There's even MAGA Muslims, those guys who endorse Trump, out in Michigan and whatnot. All of those people have a role to play, just like you, being born from someone with deep Texas ancestry and, a Londoner, just like me being born with deep Texas ancestry through my mom being Mexican and generations of Latinos, in Texas, and my dad being Scotch Irish. All of that stuff, we need to stop thinking of this moment we're in terms of tribalism and start thinking of it in terms of what we value and take a yes and approach. Because if someone's wrong, but they're active, it's still better than sitting at home, not doing anything, not being a voter, right?
here's the advice that I've been really thinking hard about um, for the better part of the last 2 years. Is our community is often divided into uh, Salafi, Sunni. I'm speaking to the Sunni Muslims right now, right? The Salafi, Sufi, the uh, Hanafi, Shafi, Hanbali, and then on a political level, it's. And I'm not going to comment on either of those. I think that Yasser Qadhi has put out some amazing things on our theological divisions.
Mhm.
Um, on a political level, where we've been divided on a immigrant, not immigrant Muslim.
Yeah.
And the two, between the two communities, are used as pejoratives, just to be completely real.
Yeah.
Where I'll be in quote unquote convert spaces and I'll hear somebody say, well, immigrant Muslims, da 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 da. And I'll be in immigrant spaces, quote unquote, or spaces that are predominantly South Asian and Arab, and I'll hear somebody say, oh, that convert, also used as a pejorative.
Right.
What nobody seems to be doing is, one, really establishing a Muslim community, and two, understanding that the Ummah, especially the American Ummah, is a body. If Arabs are going to be hurt and hate the genocide in Palestine, as we all should, then you have to also be hurt and hate the ethnic cleansing, the militarization of the police force, the environmental racism and injustices that have been done onto the brown and black communities of the United States. Wherever you live, I can point to any city and say, Cancer Plot. I can point to any city and say, militarized police force. You can do that anywhere in the United States. At the same time, if the brown, black, and white convert community are going to be mad about our situation in the United States and do nothing for the people of Palestine, or sit quietly by and say Gaza in passing,
Or not even mention Sudan.
or not even mention Sudan, or say Sudan and say nobody's talking about Sudan and then not mention Gaza, or say Gaza and never mention Sudan. Whatever the case may be,
Sure.
the oppression is global. And if we're not seeing ourselves as a part of the solution, then we really need to rethink our participation in this faith. Is it just an academic exercise, or are you doing this to change the world? Are you going to the people of Houston, to Fifth Ward Islamic centers, and helping with grocery handouts? Are you going to protests that are happening every week? Are you actually doing this religion? Or is it just I'll pray my namaz, or I'll pray my salah, or I'll pray my salat, depending on which community you want to claim you're from. And that will be that. Because quite honestly, as you've stated, we don't have time anymore.
Right.
This is no longer a political threat. It is very much a familial threat.
Mm-hmm.
It's a threat to our community. It's a threat to our individual persons, every single one of us. And so we don't have time to think, oh, but my money's much sweeter than doing some Muslim activism. My money's much sweeter than whatever you got going on. Get involved. And for God's sakes, just do something. You can go hand out soup at a soup kitchen, but just do it. Wear a kufi when you're doing it. Don't wear a kufi. Just introduce yourself as Abdullah. Pray your salah while you're at the soup kitchen. Do something that people can see. The Muslims are here and they're showing up for me at a time that I need it.
And I love what you're saying so much, because I recently heard this from a teacher of mine on kind of a private lecture that he did, but this part I can definitely talk about. When the Prophet ﷺ made the hijrah to Medina, and he framed it this way, which is embarrassing for me because I'm the public relations guy, but I'd like to think I influenced him a bit. He's like, there's no bigger PR moment in the history of a person than when the Prophet ﷺ entered Medina, because the people had heard about him, they recruited him, most of them had never even seen him, and they were waiting day after day to see if he made it safely into the city out of fleeing from Mecca. And what's the first thing he said when he entered the city? Because that's a moment like when everyone's paying attention. He said, spread peace and feed one another. Right? And he didn't say, oh, Muslims. He didn't say, oh, mu'mineen. He said, An-nas, all humans, spread peace amongst each other and feed those who need it. And what's so beautiful about that is when you were talking about the money that you're making and being sweet, or the entrepreneurialism, or the Muslim issues, I have always tried to tell Muslims, and I think maybe I'm clumsy in the way I'm messaging it, but like activism is the insurance policy for your business, for the masjid. for all the things that you care about. And when you don't show up, what you're saying is, I actually don't care about the masjid because I'm leaving it vulnerable. I actually really don't care about my business because it could be shut down because I'm a Muslim and, I could be deported like that. Um, so the last thing I would say, and I want your thoughts on this because I think when people hear us talk this way, a lot of times it'll get framed or spun or even understood as being just 100% revolutionary. And so for me, I'm someone who I try to appreciate all different types of activism. So like I can make a case for incrementalism and I can make a case for some more radical approach. But what I don't think the Muslim community should be engaging in is activism that's so revolutionary that you destroy the systems of civic life that exist. The answer for the moment, I think, is to strengthen the civic institutions, to strengthen the First Amendment, to strengthen, like, personally, my reaction to defund the police was no, fund support services for the police, meaning like mental health counselors, actual, people who are experts in homelessness and helping people facing that. So to me, I think the one thing that can distinguish the Muslim community is that we can be in a place that welcomes all frustration, but then guides to productive activism. And I think we should be telling our legislators, you know, introduce some legislation to strengthen the War Powers Act, uh, reintroduce a way to take the Leahy laws to apply to everyone. Um, you know, a lot of states passed religious liberties restoration acts. You could do that at the federal level. You could do a restoration of the Bill of Rights Act. If we were doing things like that, we're not burning the system down, but we're making the system work for everybody. And that should be, I think, the approach the Muslim community should take. Because if we don't talk about that in specific, then you're going to have people who are radicals that will try to highlight our community. And I don't know if it's like this in Houston or not anymore, but back in my day when I first started with CAIR, you would always find, like the Communist Party outside the mosque. You would always find, all these different really fringe movements trying to recruit the Muslims into it because they knew that we were fair game and we hadn't, really picked a side or even were civically educated. So I'm going to leave all that blurb right there and give you the last word to respond however you think and then call it a day. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Well, I want to wish everyone a blessed week, a blessed Jummah. I think I was a bit of a radical when I came into my work at CAIR, and I was a very much an abolitionist, and to a certain extent, I still am. I don't want that to be lost on myself or anyone. But I think the abolition can be of the idea that it currently is, and not of the entirety of the system. And that's what I've come to learn is, you can talk about abolishing police up until there's a hate crime on a masjid. And then you actually have to go talk to the police. And that was a learning curve for me. Now, I say all that to say, first to myself and to my community here in Houston, get involved and just do something. You can start by sweeping a masjid, as I did when I converted, and let that grow and find organizations and institutions that you support. And I hope that you'll find the work that CAIR has done and find it beneficial to you. But if it's not your cup of tea, I understand that to be the case for a lot of folks. I hope that you'll get involved with something that is. If that is a soup kitchen, then go there. But don't just let feeding people be the stop and start of your giving back. Ask people, get involved in their situations in a way that's respectful, and come to know them so that you can really be there for them. And not that you're scooping soup into a bowl, but that you are trying to be holistic and present the date foods that we ought to be, and then bring that into politics. It's really not that hard, especially in Texas, despite them trying to keep it as hard as possible, to bring about legislation that can make a change. And so if you see something that needs to be fixed, you can approach your state representative and say, I want this fixed. And, it's better if you ask ChatGPT to write you a bill and present it to them. But if you can't do that, then turn to someone that can. Because we have a long, long, long fight to go, and the Muslim issues are not going to die down, I'm sorry to say. It's not going to disappear. Islamophobia, or as my brother Isa likes to say, anti-Muslim bigotry, is not going to disappear tomorrow. We have a long fight to fight, but we need to show up for other people in the meantime. So do that. Get involved. Understand the holistics of what's going on, and act and do something and move and change something.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes, because that's how you grow and you learn. And nothing you're going to do at a local level is going to be so catastrophic. At the end of the day, we have to give ourselves and our community grace. And I want to echo a sentiment I heard you hint at over and over and over again. I deeply love our community because they're on Tawheed, right? And every person in our community, if they're sincere, at the end of the day, has more rights upon me than people of other faiths. And the reason I care, not just for my own child's future in this country to have a chance at being respected and understood and not living with the stigma over their head. It's because, honestly, I also love my fellow Americans. I want them to know what Islam really is. I want them on the day of judgment to have had a chance to be a person of Tawheed, whether Allah guides them or not. I don't want, for my own selfishness, for someone to be like, he was such a bad example of a Muslim that I was turned off and didn't even look at it. And then at the end of the day, something a scholar told me once is you can't help people if you don't love them, because honestly, your approach is going to be paternalistic, and at some point, the Muslim should be the person that's optimistic and should be the person that's that date tree that stands tall but still gives back, no matter how hard it is. Because at the end of the day, this world is it's a temporary one, and the real justice will be served on the last day. It's just the question we have to answer is, did we do our part?
Absolutely.
Jazakallah for your time. Any last words?
To you or to the people? Because to you, I'll tell the people how I came to actually meet Isa. So I had been reading about Isa.
Oh my God.
Mr. Galloway.
If you're going to say anything praiseworthy, just keep it off the record. We can talk later.
No, I'm going to say it. I've been reading about Mr. Galloway for a long time. But there was something, I forget what had happened, but there was something I needed to connect with in Colorado for. And I just happened to message the chef. And I said, hey, do you know anyone in Colorado? And he goes, oh, the mover and shaker there is Isa. I'm like, you mean I finally get this brother's phone number to hit him up whenever I want? And so, Isa, you've been an amazing mentor to me and helped me through a lot of hard and difficult times at CAIR-Houston. I was trying to do a lot of what you did in the early days. I'm happy for my time there, but especially grateful to Allah for your time there and your time at all the other institutions that you've done. And it's an honor for me to have been on your show. And inshallah, I hope that with this, if someone can just take a little bit of nasiha, please just get involved. And if you see me not involved, remind me to get involved as well. Do something, because it makes a difference.
The honor's all mine, first off. Secondly, I think you far exceeded anything I did at your time at CAIR. And more importantly, what people watching this should know is we've never spoke, really. I think maybe like a 2-minute phone call once. This is the first time we've actually had a conversation. Everything else has been just on text messages and chats. So that's the testimony to me about the power of Islam, is that two people who barely know each other are brothers very deeply. And I've very much enjoyed my time benefiting from your experience and hearing your perspectives. And I hope everybody does take the best of the nasiha and forgive us for our mistakes. Ameen.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Isa. Okay. Isa? Yes. Isa Galloway.
Isa Galloway.
Isa Galloway.
Isa Galloway.
Isa Galloway, convert to Islam, defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future, the more sophisticated approach.